If you are a Black or Brown person and you are pursuing sperm donation, this is an episode you won't want to miss. I sat down with Lakia Holmes, who shared in a previous episode her journey to becoming a single parent by choice. And as we had that conversation, it became really clear to me that this topic of sperm donation was one that really deserved its own episode. Join me this week as I sit down with the incredible Lakia and we talk about how difficult it is to find a Black sperm donor when you're looking for IVF treatment. Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I'm an East Asian medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women to live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your health, offering holistic solutions for a symptom-free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are, I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show. Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. I am once again joined by Lakia Holmes. Welcome back to the show, Lakia.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
So, Lakia and I had taken a deeper dive into her IVF journey as a single parent in a previous episode. So, if you have not had a chance to listen to that episode, I would highly recommend going back to check it out because this is an extension of that conversation. So, when Lakia and I had our screening call to figure out like what are we going to talk about, I realized like she had such important milestones in her journey, in her story, that I was like, oh gosh, we've got to do this in more than one part in order to be able to do it justice. So, this second episode is specifically about her journey to find the right donor for her little girl. And I was not aware just how difficult it is to find a Black sperm donor. So I thought this would be a really important episode to put out and raise awareness around. So I just want to say thank you at the outset of this episode for sharing this part of your journey because I'm sure it's fraught with lots of emotion and how your story can help others that are also on this path.
Yeah, well, thank you for once again giving me the space and the opportunity to talk about it because before I went through the process, it's something, once again, that I didn't really know a lot about and was not aware of just how challenging of a process it would be. So anything I can do to help bring awareness and talk about and be open about it and to just help break misconceptions about the process and just again bring awareness is something I'm so happy to do.
Well, I really appreciate it because that's exactly what Reproductive Rebel is here for, is to have these kinds of conversations that aren't talked about enough, raise awareness around things that either people may not be aware of, or there has been some sort of hushed conversation around. And your openness and willingness to be able to share this with other people is just so, so important. So, one of the things that you had said to me as you were telling me the overview around your IVF journey is how hard the sperm donor selection process was. So, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I guess I'll start by once I made the decision to go the single parent by choice route. I spoke with my doctor, spoke with the nurse at RMA of New Jersey, and they started me with a list of resources. So, a list of various sperm banks across the US. to just kind of start the process of identifying who I'd want in a donor. And I didn't realize just like how granular you can get when it comes to finding the right donor, because as much as it is a choice surrounding genetics, because you have to look at the medical aspects and the genetic aspects of donor selection, you can also go down so far as to what their zodiac sign is, because it's just as much about personality as it is about the medical aspect of it. Because you, of course, you want to check off all of those medical boxes, but you also want the donor to align with you as a person, your educational level, educational goals, aspirations, personality. So I think that was the part for me that was very eye-opening, because it's like, well, when you're dating and you're searching for a partner, these are things that you consider. But for some reason, when it came to the process of donor selection, I was like, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense too. Like you should, because it's a lot of kind of the same thing. You're trying to find that perfect fit for
Right.
you. And so it was fun, but it was stressful, because so much of the fertility process is a numbers game.
Mhm.
It's all about odds. And so even when it comes to donor selection, you're looking at a pool. And by the time you kind of narrow down all these different things that you're looking for, some superficial, some not so superficial, that pool starts to get smaller and smaller. And if you are a Black or brown person looking for a donor, you're already starting with a very small pool. And so by the time you kind of filter out all these various things, that pool just gets smaller and smaller. And so that's when I realized, oh, this process isn't going to be as perhaps straightforward as I thought it would be.
Oh, wow. I don't think I realized that. So, having never gone through a selection process like that, I didn't realize you could even look by zodiac sign. That's
Mhm.
actually super cool.
Yeah. It is, because you think about all of these different things when it comes to a person's characteristics and their personality.
Right.
And so to some people, it might seem, well, what does the zodiac sign matter? But for some people, it could be very important in terms of personalities and stuff like that. So it's definitely things that you have the option to sort through and sift through to find the right match for you.
So, as you started on this journey and you realized that the pool that you were pulling from was far more narrow than you realized, how did that feel and how did that affect your journey through this process?
It was stressful. So I guess we'll kind of start with, okay, so I went through California Cryobank, which is one of the largest sperm bank providers in the US. So when you're going through the process of testing, I have to go through genetic testing. So I met with a genetic doctor, had blood work drawn, looked at all of my labs and tests to see what genetic diseases I could carry or be like a carrier for. And so you're starting from there.
Mhm.
So, like, I had sickle cell trait. So now I have to look at donors that do not have that trait.
Yep.
So that way we can help mitigate as much risk as possible to try to have the healthiest pregnancy and baby possible, right? So you're doing things like that. So that pool again starts getting smaller and smaller. So, okay, so we're looking at sickle cell trait. Okay. Now, sickle cell is a genetic disease that affects primarily Black people. Okay. So there are all these things that you're taking into consideration. So you're starting off, you're looking at your genetic markers, and you have to weed out certain things. So here's the pool that I'm starting with. Then you also have something called CMV. I can't pronounce it, but CMV. So it's basically a virus that lives in a lot of people. And you often get it as a baby or a child. So that can present in your genetics and it can cause birth defects in the baby. So whether you're CMV negative or positive, now that's another factor that you have to look for a donor against. So I am lucky enough to be CMV negative. So now that means that every donor that I look at needs to be CMV negative as well. Most people are CMV positive, so that makes the process a little bit easier for those people. For me, it's a little bit harder. So now, again, that pool is getting smaller. And so as I'm going through the process, I'm like, okay, well, it looks like I'm probably going to have to pick a white donor because as I look at all of the factors and I look at the pool of Black donors that I could draw from, the issue becomes availability because you are already working with so few Black donors. By the time you cipher out the genetic stuff and other medical things, medical history stuff like that, your pool is now smaller. And now it's, well, are they available? Is there a waiting list? And so there were the few Black donors that I could potentially use as a donor, they just weren't available. The waiting list can be months, sometimes years long because there's such high demand. And when a donor is going through the process, it's not like they can make a deposit and that deposit is available immediately because the sperm has to go through a quarantine process. So there are all these factors that are kind of affecting the timeline of availability for a donor. So I would go on the California Cryobank site and I would have like my favorites tab. And so I'd have these donors that I was very interested in. I have them favorited. And then I'm just like waiting and waiting for them to become available. And so for a lot of the Black donors that I was genetically a match for, they just weren't available. And so in my mind, it's, well, I really want to just get pregnant. I want to just get this process going. So I had said to myself, like, okay, well, it looks like I'm going to have to choose a donor of another race. And so I kind of made peace with that. There are things that you have to think about. Okay, well, what's it going to be like raising a biracial or multiracial child? What are my friends and family going to think? Because it's, well, you made a choice. You chose this donor. You chose a white donor. And so there are all these things that you have to wrap your mind around. And so there was a donor that I was really interested in that was a white donor. Age-wise, he matched up. Of course, like health and genetic-wise, he matched up. He was athletic, personality. He had a really great essay, really great interview, because these are all things that you are looking at too. It's a very stringent process. So I was like, okay, I think this is the donor. And so I went on the wait list. Now, mind you, still it's a white donor and there still is a wait list. And I was on a wait list for 9 months before I got the message that he had reached the maximum number of live births. And so he was going to be retired from the system for any new families. So he would still be available for any families that previously used his sperm in order to make siblings. But for anyone new, no, he was no longer available. They hung his jersey in the rafters. And so,
Wow. I didn't know
and
they
so,
did that.
yeah. And so there I'm like, well, shit, I've been on this waiting list for all this time and that's it. Like he's gone. And so then it was like back to the drawing board. And so that's what the process can be like for a lot of Black and brown people because just the numbers is just very much an underrepresentation of Black and Hispanic male sperm donors compared to white and Asian donors.
Why do you suppose that is now that you've been through the process?
A lot of it, I think, is kind of a lack of understanding and kind of like cultural stigmas. So, are you a fan of the Real Housewives? Or more specifically, like Real Housewives of Atlanta?
I don't watch a lot of TV, so
Okay.
I'm
Well,
sorry.
you've got kids, I get it, I understand. Well, okay. So, if there's anyone who's watching or listening that's a fan of Real Housewives of Atlanta, there's a scene from, like, a Real Housewives of Atlanta reunion. This was back, like, 10 years ago, and so Phaedra Parks is talking to Kenya Moore, and so kind of Clips Notes version, Kenya is kind of a chronically single woman who had been thinking about going through the process of finding a sperm donor to have a baby. Phaedra's married, she had 2 kids with her husband, whatever. So during the course of reunion, Phaedra kind of like reads like Kenya and basically was like, while I'm married with 2 kids, like you're going through binders at a sperm bank, looking through catalogs to try to find a donor. Like you don't know if your donor is an axe murderer or a child molester. But what you will know is that he needed $10 to get like a medium sized pizza, so he ejaculated in a cup so you could have a kid.
Wow.
And now having gone through the process, now mind you, when this interaction between the 2 of them happened, this was like 10, 11 years ago. Having now gone through the process, that makes me cringe because I think that's what a lot of people think the process is. And it's a lot more involved than that. And so I think one aspect of it is just the lack of understanding of what the process is. That these people, whether you're a sperm donor or an egg donor, you're going through a very rigorous process. They're not just picking anyone off of the street, they're going through extensive medical and genetic testing. You have to know your family's health history very well. Like, I'm going through and I'm looking at my donors, like uncles, like history, diabetes, heart disease, like any and everything, cancer, like it's a very stringent process. But I don't think a lot of people realize that. So I think that's one aspect. I think often when it comes to Black and Hispanic donors, I think there's the cultural stigma of just having kids just out there running around that you have no knowledge of and no association to. I think that plays a huge role in it because you don't wanna kind of there's that stereotype, and so I think there's that plays into it. And just overall, just I think this is something that we talked about in our first conversation is just not knowing people that have gone through the process. So you don't know what to expect. You don't know the questions to ask. So there's just a lack of understanding and education surrounding it. And so I think when you look at all of those factors, it plays a huge role in why there's such an underrepresentation in certain ethnic groups that it's disturbing, but it's also kind of understandable because if you don't know, you don't know. And so I think that has a lot to do with it. And so there's a real movement and effort going on right now to break down those stereotypes and break down those misconceptions because we are seeing an increase in people like myself who want to go single parenthood by choice, We're seeing an increase of people who are delaying parenthood. We're seeing an increase of people who are dealing with infertility, and so they need egg and sperm donation. And we're seeing an increase in LGBTQIA plus people and families who are looking at donation as an option to help build families. And so I think we're starting to see a little bit of a shift, but there needs to be more work done to help, again, break those stereotypes and misconceptions to be able to increase the numbers and have those numbers match white and Asian donors.
That's such beautiful insight. Thank you for sharing that. So once your top pick donor had his jersey hung in the rafters, what did you do next?
I was so stressed out by the
Yeah.
process. I was stressed out. I was overwhelmed. And so I took time off. I took time off. I took a year off from the journey. So I took all of 2022 off and just kind of got centered and focused on me and just clearing my mind and just kind of getting back to me because I was going through the process of the egg retrievals and everything. And then you add the process of finding a donor. And so it can be a lot, it can be very heavy, especially if you've been on a waiting list for 8, 9 months and you're just like waiting for the notification that he's available. And then to have it kind of take this complete turn and just hit the brakes on everything. And and so I knew I was going to have to start from scratch. And so I just wasn't ready to do that. So I took a year off. And I think that was the best thing that I could have done for myself to just release a lot of that pressure from wanting to be on this timeline to get pregnant. So yeah, so then I went back in the beginning of 2023, and by a miracle, by like grace of God, I just so happened to come across the donor that I eventually chose. And it's such a funny story how I came across him, but I'm telling you, it's the timing, that it's just divine timing. And I was like, okay, so taking that time off was the right thing to do.
So tell us the story of how you found this donor. I'm dying to know.
So with all of these sperm banks that you're working with, they have membership tiers or subscription tiers. So usually like you're starting with like your base subscription, which is going to be like free or whatever, but you're only allowed access to certain things, to certain info. So I had already been spending so much money on the process. I was like, I cannot afford like 200 some dollars for a higher tiered subscription to be able to see adult photos. So like you'll automatically get access to like child photos.
Mhm.
But if you got to spend more money to get access to adult photos, to get access to certain records, to get access to like voice interviews. So, at the end of the day, it's a business.
Wow.
I was like, I cannot afford an extra two, $300, $400 to have these higher tier subscriptions to see all this extra info. Yes, it would be great to have all of this extra info, but listen, I'm getting child photos, I'm getting genetic workups and markups, I'm getting staff thoughts and opinions on the donors, like all this extra stuff. Yes, it'd be nice to have, but I just can't afford that right now. So I had attended like a virtual webinar or something through California Cryobank. And so as part of attending that webinar, I got like a promo code for a free month of like tier 2 subscription. So I was able to see adult photos and gain access to other info. So I signed up for that. And I was at work one day. And so you'll get like an email. It's, oh, new donors have popped up. So I got an email. I'm sitting at work early one morning. I was on set for a shoot and got this email. Oh, a new donor is back in stock. It wasn't phrased that way, but that's just essentially what it was. It was like, hey, we have a donor who's back in stock. So I open up the email and I see this man's face. And I was like, I said, who is this handsome man? And he was black. And I was like, okay, let's click and let's see if he checks all of the boxes. So I go on and look at his profile, see his adult photos, see his child photos. He has a master's degree, went to law school, he's a practicing attorney. I was getting like all of this deep information. And I'm like, hey, personality wise, check. He knows like 5 languages. He's athletic. He's black, Puerto Rican, Costa Rican. I'm like, check, check, check. Like he's checking off all the boxes. So then I'm like, okay, well, really what it's going to come down to is the medical history and the genetic factors. And that's CMV status again. So I go and I'm like, okay, well, let's look at his medicals. So I go and I click on the medicals, and he isn't a carrier for anything that I'm a carrier of, and he was CMV negative, and I was like,
Where have you been all my life?
"Where have you been all of my life?" Because here's the other thing, on paper, he's everything that I want in a guy. Like, I'm like, "Why can't I meet you in real life and, like, date you?" Because, like, you are everything, like, knows 5 languages, athletic, like, high school wrestling champion, like, everything, like, he was perfect on paper, and then on top of that, all of the medicals seemed to check out. I was like, "Who is this man? I need him." So I have to go through and I reach out to the sperm bank and I say, I'm interested in this guy. Is he available? Because I see on the website that he's not in stock right now. So I call them and I'm like, hey, I'm interested in this donor. And they're like, well, he's not available right now. And so now I'm having PTSD from the previous donor that I was interested in. It's okay, I'm on a waiting list. I'm like, okay, well, how long is the waiting list? Like, how long will I have to wait? And they're like, well, we're not sure. Like, we see that he has vials in quarantine, but we don't know when they'll be available for purchase. But if you want, we can put you on the waiting list. And I was like, okay, put me on the waiting list. So again, PTSD.
Of course.
I'm fully expecting to be on a waiting list for months because this guy, like, I just know he is popular and highly in demand, right?
Right.
So, about 3 weeks later, I get a phone call from a representative at California Cryobank. And they're like, "Hey, we see that you're interested in this donor. Are you still interested?" And I said, "Yeah, of course, like, I'm still interested." They're like, "Well, we have vials available." So what happened was, so with California Cryobank specifically, and this is probably the case for a lot of other sperm banks, if you purchase vials and you end up not using all of them, the sperm bank will oftentimes buy the vials back and give you like half of your money back. But as long as you don't have the vials leave their facility. So they say, well, someone had vials available, but they don't need them anymore. So we bought them back. So if you want, they're available. And I will never forget this day. And then the representative said, I was going through the list and your name is towards the bottom of the list. And usually we start from the top of the list, but I saw your name and something about your name just made me give you a call and see if you were interested. And I was like, yeah, I'm interested. And so she was like, well, how many vials would you need? I said, well, I'm going through the process of IVF. And so my doctor suggests that I start with minimum 4 vials. And so the representative on the phone is, oh, we have 4 vials available. We have exactly 4 vials available.
Oh, I got goosebumps. That's
Yeah.
so awesome.
Yeah. And I was like, what? And she's going, yeah, we have exactly 4 vials available. Do you want them? Do you want to purchase them? And I was like, yes. And the only thing about this process, it's not cheap. The pricing for vials of sperm varies between the donor, how the sperm is prepared based on what kind of treatment you're going through. So you have IVI vials, you have IVF vials. And so the sperm is all prepared a certain way to match the procedure that you're going to be using them for. So that also affects the price. So for 4 vials of his sperm, the cost was roughly almost $9,000.
Wow.
And of course, that's not covered by insurance. I can't call up my Blue Cross Blue Shield. Like, I have to pay for that myself. And so she goes, well, if you're interested, like, you can go ahead, you can buy the vials. I know that you have to call your bank and give them a heads up to make a large purchase like that. So I'll give you some time to reach out to your bank and stuff. So give me a call back by the end of the day. And so I hang up the phone with her, and now I'm here, like, sifting through, trying to figure out the financials because it's okay, I can put this much on this credit card. I can put this much on this credit card because you can't put everything on one credit card because it could trigger like spending limits and all this. It was like crazy. And so, like, I mapped it out. It's like, okay, so I give her a call back and I'm like, okay, so we're going to put this much on this credit card. You're going to put this much on this credit card. And then so I had to divide it between 3 credit cards to make the purchase.
Yeah.
So I went ahead, made the purchase. So by the time you paid for the sperm and for the shipping costs to send it from California Cryobank to my fertility clinic, I've spent now over $9,000 for 4
Wow.
vials of sperm. But I was like, oh shit, this is happening. This is really happening. And again, it's just like it was proof to me that God's hand was in this process because while I was happy with who I thought my donor was going to be back in late 2021, now it's 2023, and this was the donor. I'm sure I would have been happy with that donor back in 2021, but this donor was so much more of a fit. This is who it was meant to be. And so it was just like made me so happy because it's not only did I find a donor that was Black, but he's highly educated. Now, of course, all of the donors are educated, but he has like a law degree, knows multiple languages. He just checked off every single box. And I was like, this is who my child's father is supposed to be. So I went, made the purchase, went to a little bit of credit card debt, but I found my donor. And so from the time I got the first email, seeing his face was February 2023, made the purchase in March 2023, immediately sent the sperm to RMA of New Jersey, went through my second egg retrieval in May 2023, another retrieval July 2023, and then did the embryo transfer in August 2023. So from the time that I found him, it was like, boom, it was like, let's go, let's do this. Like, we're making the baby, let's go.
That's awesome. Well, but that just goes to show, like, when things are aligned and they're meant to be, everything just flows. You
Mhm.
found the perfect donor, and literally everything just fell into place after that.
Everything fell into place. And whereas back in 2021, the process felt so heavy and
Mhm.
stressful and overwhelming. Fast forward to 2023, it was still those things, but nowhere near the same level. And so again, that was just confirmation to me that this was the right choice. And then everything just fell into place. And I was lucky and blessed to be able to come away with 4 embryos,
Mhm.
2 boys and 2 girls. And then was blessed to be able to get pregnant on the first embryo transfer. And so again, it was just the alignment of it all. And so I was very blessed and very lucky for
Oh,
that.
that's such a beautiful part. I'm so glad we did a second episode on this part specifically because this is huge. So
Yeah.
I was aware that IVF was a lot. And a lot of
Mhm.
the couples that I work with in my practice, I tend to be working with essentially like a husband and wife pair and or couples where the husband is having the fertility challenge and so
Mhm.
there is
Yes.
some consideration around a sperm donor. I have worked with egg donation as well, but usually by the time they get to me they're like the majority of the way through that part of the process and I'm just helping to support their health for optimal results with their transfers. So I didn't realize just how rigorous this donor process really was.
Yeah, and that's the thing, it's like, you don't know until you're in it or until you talk to someone who's been through the process. And when it comes to fertility overall, that's what a lot of it is, just opening up the conversation to be able to share your story, to understand and to educate and to motivate, because I had no idea what to expect until I was in the middle of it. And, it's called a fertility journey for a reason because it truly is. And you're learning so much about the process and you're learning a lot about yourself in the process. And I was able to build community in the process as well, because another great thing about California Cryobank and a lot of other sperm banks do this too is I made it a point that no matter who the donor is going to be, I wanted the donor to be identifiable. I did not want in that to use an anonymous donor. I did not want to use a donor who did not want to be known in any way, shape, or form. I wanted to make a point to find a donor who is willing to be identifiable. And the way it goes is that once the child turns 18, the child has to make the decision on whether they would like to reach out to the donor. So that was something that was very important to me. So I'm also very grateful that this gentleman decided to make himself available. And so there's that, but then there's also community that I've built with the other families that have used the donor. So it's a mix of LGBTQ plus families as well as single moms by choice. And so that is another aspect that I think isn't quite understood, because I've had people come to me and be like, well, that's weird. Like, why would you want to know, one, who the donor is, and two, know other people that have used the donor and build relationships? But that's a key part of who Isla is. So why wouldn't I want her to know who her siblings are? Why wouldn't I want her to decide for herself if she wants to reach out to the person that helped make her possible? So when we go back to the very beginning of our conversation, we talked about those stereotypes and misconceptions. I think that's a huge part of it too. It's you are doing something that's so selfless in helping another person build their dream and starting a family. And so it's so cool to be able to be in a Facebook group with Isla's siblings and seeing the similarities between them all. They're all relatively close in age, with they're all within 2 years of one another so far. I think so far there's maybe roughly about 12, 13 children. So to build those bonds and those relationships has been really special. And I think that's a part of the process that should be talked about more too, because it's important. You have someone who is altering the course of their lives to help me and to help others fulfill their dreams of parenthood. And so I don't feel so alone
Mm.
in the journey. Yes, I'm a single mom by choice, but I can't wait for Isla to eventually meet her siblings and to be able to see like the little similarities between a lot of them. It's so cool and just so just amazing to see where medicine has come in terms of IVF and that this is an option for so many people.
That's so cool. I didn't realize that you were able to connect with other people who had the same donor. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. It was a very key aspect in why I went with California Cryobank is to be able to have access to their what they call their sibling registry. So from the moment that I announced that I was pregnant, I went on the registry and just the outpouring of love and support from the other families, sending me emails and stuff. And it's, let us know if you need help, like building the baby registry. And I can come to them with questions. And we exchange photos and stuff. And it's just, they're all so cute. They're all so cute and so it'll go a long way when Isla gets older and inevitably starts asking those questions. Where's my dad? And then just explain to her that there's this really amazing, selfless guy who was generous enough to donate his sperm because he knew that there are so many people out there who dreamed of building families and he helped make their dreams come true. So, as much as I don't want Isla to grow up, but like I low key can't wait until she like turns 18 and see if she decides if she wants to reach out to him and then see what their bond could potentially be. But it's also very funny as Isla's personality shows more and more. He'll look at certain things that she does, and like my mom will be like, yeah, she must get that from her father. Yeah, yeah. She doesn't get that from us. She must get that from her dad. So it's so cool.
That's really neat. And it's nice because it's not like a surprise on 23andMe because there's secrecy
Right.
around it. And then in an age where it's actually not all that hard to get information around your genetic makeup and connection and familial ties to other
Mm,
people and be like, oh, my mother never told me this. And then it becomes
yes.
scandalous.
Yes.
Right? Right from the beginning, there's transparency and there's community and it's normalized. Like things
Yes.
don't get weird unless we make them weird, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And so I want to make this as not weird as possible for Isla. So I went into this with a game plan of how I would explain the process to her in a very age appropriate way, depending on what phase of life that she's in. And building those relationships with the other families just helps that even more. I have siblings scattered from Toronto to North Carolina to California to Texas. So for her to know that we're all in this together and that family comes in so many different forms. And for me, that's the biggest lesson that I want her to take from it, is that, wow, you are really generous to give of yourself in that way. So that way I could come here and gain a body and come down to earth. And so I have it already mapped out in my mind how I'll explain it to her. And so again, it's just being as transparent as possible with her to normalize it, to break that stigma, and for her to know that she was meant to be here. She's
Mm.
here for a reason. She was meant to be here. She was meant to be my child, and I was meant to be her mom.
I was
And
gonna
he
say
was meant to be her dad.
he totally was meant to be her dad because that donor story, like, that's the kind of flow around her conception
Mhm.
that just shows that she was meant to be here exactly when she was meant to be here,
Yeah.
and she's gonna do incredible things. Oh, I've got goosebumps. That's such a beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing this journey with us because I don't think people appreciate in general, and this actually kind of goes back to a little bit of what we talked about in the first episode, where you had talked about some of the online trolls that had
Mhm.
said things about like being selfish. And this is such a nuanced, hard in a lot of ways process
Mhm.
because your heart is so invested and you have to wait on the system and every aspect of IVF is a hard journey.
Mhm.
Whether you're doing it with a partner or you're a single parent by choice, it doesn't matter. IVF is a hard journey for people to go through physically, emotionally, spiritually. There's so many things that are called into question, are taxed, challenge you in terms of this whole process.
Mhm.
And I really found the lack of awareness around Black and brown donors being something that I definitely wanted to make sure to highlight in this show because I wasn't aware that there was such a small pool to choose from in the first place. If you were to leave the audience with any final thoughts around this, because I am going to be bringing Lakia back for another episode, she had kind of alluded to the cost of doing all of this as she was talking about the fact that she had to pay for the vials out of her own pocket. And we are going to come back and do another episode specifically around the IVF journey and the costs associated with it. But if you were to leave our audience with any final thoughts about this donor selection process and this part of your journey, what would that be?
I think it would be, it's not for everybody, but I think there really needs to be a call to action, especially amongst Black and Hispanic men, to consider it, look into it. Again, it's not for everybody, but don't be so quick to dismiss being potentially a donor, because there are so many people like myself who are dealing with infertility, who need help, and who are looking to have donors that match them. And then I think also we need to be careful when criticizing people and families who chose donors of another race or ethnicity because there's backlash in that as well. And so it all comes down to education, understanding, and acceptance. And so I think that's what I would leave people with. You are compensated very well. You're not getting paid $10 to ejaculate in the cup, like Phaedra Park said. No, you're being paid considerably well to do it because it is a huge effort when it comes to time, when it comes to all of the testing and the psychological testing that you go through to be a donor. So it's not a small feat. So take a look, do the research, see if it could be the right thing for you, because there are so many people out there who could use your help in building their dream family.
I love that. Thank you so much again for joining me for another episode and for sharing this very rigorous part of your journey with our audience. And I hope that for those of you listening, that this story helps guide you on your own journey to whatever your journey to parenthood looks like. And be sure, like I said, to check out the previous episode where Lakia tells her whole story of how Isla came into the world. And make sure to subscribe so that you can catch us for the next episode as well. Thank you so much for joining me today, Lakia. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to part 3 of our conversation.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist and acutonics practitioner, herbalist, and Chinese nutritional therapist Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like and follow us at Moon Essence Me on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.